Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fuel Stop Chats. Tonight, James and I are visited by David Goldman. I'm Chris Black.
I'm James.
And that's David Goldman. David is I would say, world-renowned photographer, or quickly becoming world-renowned. And certainly from the GPS tags I saw on all those photos, world traveler. And so welcome to the podcast, David. We were right before we started recording, we were talking about the way that motorcycles can break down barriers. And we were talking about how divisive things have become, politically. Are you jabbed? Are you not jabbed? Are you for it, anti-vax, or blah, 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 blah. And you get out on a bike and you might have a discussion about whether it's a Harley or not, or it's a German bike or it's not, but it's all fun. It's all in jest. And it was refreshing to see the photos. David, did you do most of the traveling for the project? Was that during 2020? Was that during the pandemic?
So it was kind of twofold. I did it. I've done two big trips. And then I've done some sporadic stuff when I began the series, and I was just sort of, it hadn't really coalesced, but I was kind of doing the portraits. If I was, I'm a documentary photographer. So if I was in India and there was a subject I was aware of, I would reach out to them. But that was early days. Like I had 7 or 8 subjects at that time. But so last summer, so the summer of 20, which was like the first summer of COVID, I was sitting on the couch, like many people, wondering what's the deal, and eating far too much ice cream. If this is sponsored by Haagen-Dazs, I'll give you my address. Actually, I don't want it. I don't need to be diabetic so soon. But I was eating too much ice cream, and I thought I had been wanting to do this series, and I thought, I was riding a 2004 Triumph Thruxton. And I loved it. It was awesome. I had it in Brooklyn. I had it when I was in Toronto, and I had it in LA, where I'm living now. And I decided, if I really want to do this project and I want to use the motorcycle as a mobile photo studio, I need a bike that is going to be more conducive to that kind of activity. And the Thruxton is, as much as I love it, and as sort of cool as one can look on that bike, and far cooler than wearing a snowsuit on an adventure bike. But anyway, I sold it. And literally the next day I bought a 790 Adventure. And so that was last year in 20. And I basically wanted to do a proof of concept. I wanted to see if I could actually use the motorcycle as a mobile photo studio, if I could travel on it, if I was like comfortable, and do a trip. And so I did about 6,000 miles, and I left LA and I went up to Northern California and into Oregon and Washington and Wyoming and Montana and Colorado and Utah, Nevada, and like this kind of
loop,
like a hook, and came back to LA, and I shot like 17 portraits on that trip. And I was like, wow, I think I can do it. I think this is like a viable way to do it. And then so this summer, I just, there were some personal things that happened in my family, and some difficult things, and I just thought I needed to. Well, I can just say my mom passed away in February. And
sorry.
Thank you. This past February, and it was very quickly, and it happened very quick. And not unlike people who travel to kind of deal with grief and clear their heads and things like that, I did that. But I'm not someone to just travel aimlessly, so I used the motorcycle portraits as kind of a I don't know, like a way to keep moving, like having a direction. And so this summer I thought, all right, I wanted to do this trip around the US and Canada. And then this summer I just thought, all right, I'm going to do it. And I had really nothing holding me back. And so I did it.
So let's take a quick break real quick and go back for a second, because the people that are tuning into this have absolutely no fucking clue what we're talking about. So I came across your photo of you and Lyle Lovett, Lyle Lovett on a classic BMW, and I went down the rabbit hole, and next thing I know, I'm at themotorcycleportraits.com. Is that the correct? So
that is correct.
Themotorcycleportraits.com. And for the YouTube guys, you're seeing the pictures right now. For people listening to the podcast, go to the website. And what you will find is you're going to be greeted by a page of people that go across every spectrum from Lyle Lovett, who's a Grammy award winning songwriter and performer, to just your basic Joe, us. What I really like is you have a photo of them, and then you have a nice audio clip that goes with them. I was going through it, and I think one of the ones that, and I was telling Chris about this earlier, the one that really struck me the most was the father-son of Elliot and Brandon Smith, or no, Scott, sorry, Elliot and Brandon Scott out of Atlanta. It's a father and a son, but when I say a son, he's 12 years old, and they did an iron butt, the 50cc challenge, and you have the audio clip from the dad, you have the audio clip from the 12-year-old, and and he's talking about, he was riding on the bike, and next thing he knows, he woke up and his neck pillow was gone. So the kid's on the back of this Goldwing, and he's falling asleep while his dad's knocking out the 50cc. But you have, Kevin Schwartz, it was what, the 93 500 Schwartz, yeah, he was the 93 500cc world champion, to just the average guy. There's some really good stories in there, and they're quick audio clips, maybe 1 or 2, 3 minutes, but it's a project that you've been putting together. And talk to us about the project. What was the background on this? How did this come about?
So it came about. So as I said, I'm a documentary and portrait photographer. I got my start in the music world. People may know I did a pretty big Blink 182 album cover. It's like 21 years ago. Yeah, the nurse with the glove. So that I kind of got my start in that world. I shot music, album packaging, publicity, and stuff. But then about 10 or 12 years ago, I switched my discipline to more documentary work, and I work for NGOs. And I spent a lot of time in developing countries like India and Bangladesh and Cambodia. And it was very clear to me how motorcycles in developing countries are used as a utilitarian tool, how a father can get his kid to school to get an education to extricate themselves out of poverty. And I compared that to in developed countries, in the West, where for the most part, a motorcycle is a luxury item, where you can just go off and you can clear your head and you have freedom and all these things that we talk about. And I thought that was fascinating. And I had been using different technologies in my work, like audio and GPS and augmented reality. And I had pitched a story to 60 Minutes a number of years ago, and I wanted to show how using all this technology would be a great way to enhance their product. Anyway, when I thought about the motorcycles, I thought this might be interesting to pitch to Honda, because I know a Honda back in the day had you meet the nicest people on a Honda, and how it really blew the doors open to the U.S. market, whether it was small, Honda passports or whatever it was. But Honda is such a huge company, and they sell millions of bikes year round. So I thought, if I could do portrait, like so many people, I'm like, hey, maybe they'll give me a motorcycle and I can travel around the world. Wouldn't that be cool? No one's ever came up with that idea. So I, through a connection, I actually was introduced to the marketing department at Honda, and I went and I pitched them this story. I thought I was meeting like one guy, and then it turns out I met like a whole marketing department at their main offices in Torrance. And I was like, holy shit, this is like a big meeting. Like all the big dudes are here. I was kind of mentally ill prepared, but I think I did a good job. And they seemed really interested in like, oh, would you like a Goldwing to do this? And I'm like, well, I don't think I could take a Goldwing around the world, but like, if you want to give me a Goldwing, I'll do it as a proof of concept in the States or whatever. Like, give me a bike, I'll figure it out. Anyway, they kind of strung me along for a bit. And then in the end, they ghosted me. But I'm not the type of person to take no for an answer. So I just kept kind of doing the portraits on my own. I was like, oh, I'll do a portrait, but I wanted to do an interview, and I wanted to use GPS because something like motorcycles, people travel all over the world, And so I wanted to show how motorcycles are inclusive. And I wanted to show how that, father in India takes his kid to school. But I wanted to show the woman, in the United States who maybe got out of an abusive relationship and found her independence, and now she's riding around the world. Or a bunch of guys get together in the garage and they've hung out for like 30 years and they've built some bike. I wanted to show these different stories. And so that's what I pitched to Honda. And then when it didn't work out, I just kind of followed that premise and continued to shoot. And, one shot became 2, 3, 4. And then it was kind of like when I shot the guys at 60 minutes, like it was really, I got the first guy, and then the first guy introduced me to the second guy, and then the second guy introduced me to the third guy. And by the time the third guy came, the fourth and the fifth guy wanted to be part of it. So now it's got to the point where people, if they're aware of the series at all, they're actually, some people are reaching out to me to be part of it, which is fascinating because that's not what I was thinking. But I describe it as a series for people whose lives are deeply connected to motorcycles. So like builders, racers, collectors, and world travelers, or people I might meet that I feel qualify. And that's kind of how it's going. And I think I'm closing in on 90 portraits, which is kind
wow. Yeah, it's very interesting. I fell in love with it right away because it's something that, as a motorcycle enthusiast, I connected to it. And for me, I was telling Chris this. I feel like it's a time capsule of thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about the father and the son, and you talk about Lyle Levitt, and there's a real interesting parallel between those two subjects, because one of the things I didn't expect, but I always love to get, now that I've heard it a couple of times, is when people get emotional. I ask the questions, I say, introduce yourself. I ask all the same questions. Introduce yourself. Tell me how you got started. Like, what was the hook? What set the hook for you for motorcycling? Tell me a great story or like an experience that simply wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for motorcycles. And then finally, what does motorcycling mean to you? And Lyle tells this story about when he was a kid and he would go with his dad and he would sit on the bike and he would hold on to his dad, and it made him feel close to his father. And I know that, like men are tough and whatever, and they don't talk like that kind of stuff. But there's a huge gaping hole of fathers who aren't connected with their children, and, boys or girls who don't connect with their fathers. And I just thought it was, myself included. And I thought it was like a really powerful moment when he talked about how he felt close to his dad. And then you have this story of the dad taking his son, who's literally like behind him. And I just thought this is a beautiful moment when people talk about motorcycling and they talk about the freedom, and I think words like freedom are interchangeable for autonomy and being your own person and not being accountable. And so I love these little beautiful moments. I'm just finishing an edit of a couple I met in Humboldt County, and the woman they're an interracial couple, and we met them up there, and they told me that they sold their house and all their belongings, and they did a 1.5-year trip down to Ushuaia, and she's telling this story, and she's starting to cry because she's recognizing how empowering motorcycling is to her confidence. And it's beautiful. I love to hear stuff like that.
So I'd flip the script on you, because I went through the entire catalog of everybody that you have in there, but I don't see you.
It's funny.
So what was your first bike? What was the hook?
Yeah.
And tell us the story.
It's funny. I've said to friends, I go, man, I don't know what I would say if like the questions were turned to me, and look what you've done. Okay. So I'll tell you. So my first bike, hey, my name's David Goldman. I'm a documentary and portrait photographer. My first bike that I officially had for a significant period of time was I think it was 75 or 76 CB400F Super Sport that I bought off a buddy. That I was bugging him every year. I'm like, hey, Rick, you want to sell that bike? Nah, I don't think so. And then for whatever reason, he sold it. And this is only like 10 years ago. I've had my license since I was 16, but I didn't own a bike until 10 years ago. And anyway, he sold me that bike, and I had it for probably like 4 or 5 years. And I drove it from Toronto to Brooklyn. And so many people would stop me on the street. I used to kind of lock it to a lamppost in front of my apartment. And older guys would be like, oh man, I love that bike. That was my first bike. So many people told me that was their first bike. So that was my first bike. What's the next question? What was the hook? I think it was the hook for me was a battle of wills with my mother, because it was less about
like a lot of people.
I wanted to be a race car driver. I wanted to be a Formula One race car driver, but I came from a middle class family. Like I didn't get everything I wanted, but I didn't want for anything. Like like everything that I needed, I got, but I didn't get everything I wanted. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I was 16, and I lived in Toronto, where it was, well, makes me sound dumb, but where I needed a vehicle to get to school. It was just like, it wasn't going to work without having a car. And I was like, Mom, can you buy me a car? I didn't want a new car. I just wanted a car. And she's like, no, we're not buying you a car. And I'm like, well, then I'm going to get a motorcycle. And so it was like this with my mom. And so I went and I took a motorcycle course. I knew enough that they wouldn't, I needed to take a safety course at 16. So I took a course, whatever. And then I went out and I bought this used GS 550 ES, I think, the Suzuki. This was 1986. So it was probably like an 83 or an 82 around that time. Anyway, I bought the bike. My mom drove me down to pick it up at this guy's house, which I kind of can't believe she did. And she followed me home. And that was a long weekend in Toronto. And all weekend long, the bike kept crapping out on me. And it was hot. And I'm wearing my leather jacket. And I'm pushing the thing. And it's fucking so hot. And I'm dropping it. And anyway, she's like, on Monday or Tuesday, because it was a long weekend, on Tuesday, we're taking this motorcycle back. We're going to tell him to give you your money back. And I'll pay for insurance for a car. Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting beeps. But anyway, so I returned the bike and I bought a piece of shit 1978 Honda Accord that looked like it was shot with rust bullets. It was just like all rusted. And then I didn't officially own a bike until 10 years ago, but I rented bikes along the way. I rented a Harley. I lived in LA. My buddy and I rode up to Laguna Seca. We rented a Fat Boy and a Road King. And then we did a trip to Spain and we rented BMWs and went from Barcelona to Valencia. Whatever. And I rented a bunch of times. I'm sorry about the beeping. I guess I can just quit that. So that was that. And then I ask a good story. So for me, the stories are the fact that motorcycling, I actually compare a motorcycle, the motorcycle, to a camera, because both of them have this ability to allow me to get into communities. And what I love most about my job is that I get to meet different people in different places of the world and in different types of lifestyles and cultures and religions, all that kind of stuff. And the motorcycle has allowed me to get into these communities, as the camera acts like a key to a doorway. And so to me, that's the greatest thing about motorcycles. It doesn't matter where I am. It's just like people come out, they're like, oh, tell me about that bike. Or my buddy has a joke. He says that he wants to put a sticker on his bike that says, just because I have a motorcycle doesn't mean I want to talk to you, which I think is pretty funny.
It's funny. We were talking about this on one of our other chats with somebody. And for me, what I find fascinating is I can get in my car, and I have driven, coast to coast in a car. And, if you're in a hurry, you can stop and get gas and hit the head and jump in the car and roll and don't talk to a soul. Yeah. You cannot do that on a bike.
No, you have to make a really big effort to not talk to somebody.
Right?
You have to be a prick.
Yeah. And that's what I love is it doesn't matter whether it's an old guy I ran into on a missed turn, stopping for fuel. And he's telling me, oh, yeah, I see your Pennsylvania license plate. He says, I was made in Pennsylvania. I said, excuse me? And he goes, well, my mom and dad were on vacation. They were up in the Poconos, and they tell me that's where I was made. Now, how do you have that conversation if you're in a car, right? You don't.
It would never happen.
But so I saw some of the photos. I looked at all the photos, but a couple of them really caught my interest from a staging perspective. There's a picture of a guy and a gal, and he has his arms circled like this, and the sun is coming through, right? How long did you stand there waiting for that? Or is that?
Well, so that shot is on an island called Grand Manan, which I will say I'd never heard of. And it's basically in Canada. It's off. So if this is Maine and this is, well, for this side, this is New Brunswick. And basically you have the Bay of Fundy. and it's a small island in the Bay of Fundy. And like the day before, somebody's like, oh, have you somebody said something about Grand Manan. I'm like, what the fuck is Grand Manan? And as a Canadian, I feel like I should have heard of this place, right? And anyway, so I don't know if you've heard of the Moto Social, but it's like this motorcycle socializing event they do once a month in different cities all over the world, started by some guys, a man and his wife in Toronto. And so he was really helpful with me. I'm like, hey, Vic, do you know anybody in Nova Scotia, like who I could ride with, or anybody in Newfoundland or in wherever? And he's like, oh, this couple they just moved from New Brunswick to Grand Manan. Reach out to them. So they were really kind. And this is the thing about people being really nice. So anyway, they said, yeah, come to the island. And so he's this wild guy, and he rides a chopper, and he takes the chopper like on the dirt bike track, and he's jumping it. He's nuts. He's wild. So they were telling me about this beautiful cliff where you have incredible sunsets. So we rode out to that cliff, and I mean, I know as a photographer, like you've heard the saying, like the 10,000 hours. You've done your 10,000 hours. You know your business. Yeah. So I know the sunsets. I know what's going to happen. I set them in a particular location. They were going to be backlit, obviously, and the sun's dropping, and then just kind of like ding, and it just like Indiana Jones, it's like ding, and then it kind of goes
yeah,
and it was just like that. So I had composed the shot, and I was shooting, and then the sun hit right there. Like before, it was up here. And then and it was highlighting here, and then it kind of dropped down, and then bing. And I think they were just kind of holding fingers. It was kind of this nice little moment between them. So yeah.
So I saw that one of the documentaries you worked on, like you said, you worked with a lot of NGOs. You were doing some stuff with anti-human trafficking, and you have a thing in there with Lauren Trantham.
Yeah, Lauren Trantham. Yeah.
So did you meet her working on the documentary, or was it a part of what she does in an NGO?
Well, so it's really interesting with Lauren, and the problem is I cannot remember how I became aware of her. I definitely became aware of her prior to me doing this series. And I think it might have been because I was doing work in India on human trafficking, and I found out about this woman that rides bikes, and I was wondering if there was I just was wondering if there's something we could do together, or if I could contribute, because I'm always looking to help out, if whatever, bring awareness to issues and causes is kind of my thing. But then when I was on this trip and I really put it together, and I'm like, oh, Lauren would be amazing, because she does something that I believe in very strongly, and her project is really powerful, and so she's in she's in Oregon. I forget what little town, it says it on the picture, but yeah, so she agreed to be in the picture, and I actually just saw her last weekend at the IMS show in Costa Mesa. She was, because they're putting together a motorcycle to auction to help to raise money. She's a wonderful woman, and her family was awesome, and they allowed me, I photographed her, and then they're like, you can stay here, and they put me up for the night and fed me, so that was nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, and she had a great story, so go to the website. Again, the website is the motorcycleportraits.com, and check out some of these stories. So, I mean, as you're working on this, is there an end to this, or is this going to just be series 1, series 2, series 3? What's your next step with this project?
Well, so I still have, I think, about 7 or 8 portraits to edit from this. I've shot a few since I've been back. So I have a few more to edit from that. And I would like to go to Europe next summer and continue the series there.
You should go with us.
Yeah, we're going.
You going to Europe?
Isle of Man TT races. Ooh,
that would be cool. I've been to the Isle of Man. I actually, total side story, I stowed away on a boat to the Isle of Man. I didn't know anything about the TT race at the time. I was 20, and my buddy and I were traveling in Europe, and I'd heard about the Isle of Man, probably because I knew that Nigel Mansell, who was a Formula One race car driver, was like a cop there. Yeah. And I thought, oh, let's go to the Isle of Man. Maybe we'll see Nigel Mansell.
We'll see him. Get arrested.
Get arrested. I stowed away. I traded. This is so ridiculous. I traded a can of chunky beef soup to the guy at the port, and he opened the door and he goes, "Okay, get on the boat and just like go hide in a room." And I'm like, "Okay." We fucking slept the night and woke up and like, and we got off the boat. I think it docked at like 5 a.m. or something. So we're like these two teenagers, just tired and nothing is open or wandering around and nothing to do. But anyway, I'd like to get to Europe next summer and to continue it. I'm beginning to see what the feasibility is to do a book. I'd like to do a book. I do feel like I need to get some higher profile people to get publishers a little bit more interested. So I'm reaching out to some bit like, to the Jay Leno's and to those types of people. But I'm being very patient.
I mean, you had Alex Pulls on there that works on the Billy Joel collection.
Yeah, and Alex is an amazing guy. He's such a wonderful, warm guy. And he was funny because he was like, "Oh man, I don't know if I want to be in this." And I'm like, "Well, let me just come down and meet you, and we'll just talk. We'll shoot the shit, And we got along really great. And he kind of begrudgingly agreed to be part of it.
Yeah, he hasn't agreed to be a part of us yet. He says he's too busy. But
I think it's because I literally went to the shop,
Oh, yeah.
and I hung out at the shop with him. But he's a really sweet guy, and so he's been kind enough to try to do some intros as well. So yeah, we'll see. So if I can get the right people, then I think it'll be easier to get a book deal, and that's what I'm working on. But I don't, I'll just keep doing it. Obviously I live in LA. It's not. I want to do it off the motorcycle. I don't want to fly to places to shoot it if I can avoid it. I mean, if someone wants to pay me, I'll go fly it. But yeah. So I'll just keep plugging along and see what happens. And
I'm going to put you in touch with a friend of ours, Will Willis, from he was the I guess the host, yeah, of Forged in Fire.
Forged in Fire. I don't know what that is.
So it was a series on, what was that, on AMC?
It still is. It's
a
History Channel series where they bring 4 people in, contestants. They give them a challenge, and they have to forge a hammer, a knife, or whatever. Right?
Oh, cool.
And they compete down to 2. They go back to their home forge with a pretty extensive piece of work that they have to replicate. And then they come back for the final showdown to see who wins. And Will was the host of the show for probably the first 5 seasons.
Yeah, wow. But he rode across country on a Thruxton. He's
he did what I said I wouldn't do. That's awesome.
He's a documentarian, but he's got a great story in just, why he fell in love with motorcycles. We had him on here, and it'd be somebody good for you to contact, and I think it'd be a great portion of this as you're trying to look at stepping stones and getting to that next level. Maybe he could help, maybe he can't, I don't know. But
I'm super grateful. One of the ways, in fact, is really the predominant way that I get subjects is, let's say I photograph you, then I'd be like, "Oh, who do you think would be a great subject?" And be like, "Oh, you got to photograph so-and-so." So I was able to kind of leapfrog around the country based on recommendations and stuff, it's wonderful because you're getting, somebody's vouching for you for one, and they know the person, and it's, it's more intimate versus just like kind of calling or cold calling.
You know who you need to meet? Kevin Bacon. He's no more than 6 degrees of separation from anyone on the planet.
Anyone.
That's not because he rides, just because he's the connector.
Right.
That's funny.
But no, I mean, I had the crazy idea. I was going to approach the History Channel with, they've got the pickers that go around looking at antiques and different, shows that are kind of snoozers. And every once in a while, they'll have something like Forged in Fire that I can't stop watching, or Alone, or but I do guided motorcycle tours based on American history.
Right, I saw that on your website.
All facets of history, whether it's Civil War or it's Revolutionary War, or it's music, right? And so I wanted to pitch the History Channel on, let's do a ride, and we'll go to some interesting places. We'll interview some interesting people, but we'll do that as a both motorcyclist and historian, perspective, to draw in those, kind of to your point about the key unlocking the door.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Will about it, and he said, man, he goes, after the experience he had, he said, I found it to be more fruitful for me to just do my own thing as an independent filmmaker.
It's a lot of work. I think people think that, oh, the gravy train, or I'll get this or I'll get that, or but it's a lot of work. You're dealing with a lot of people, and oftentimes your vision gets so watered down.
Yeah.
But because they want conflicts, they want it to be interesting, whatever they want, but
Yeah.
I think
now, do you do any you said you're an F1 fan. I'm sure that you'll appreciate this. Hat just happens to be sitting here, which was I got to go to the Nuremberg or the
Hockenheimring.
Hockenheimer. That was the last year of the race that they had there, which was great. I'm a Hamilton fan, so he won. It was awesome. But have you done any photos of F1 stuff?
I'm going to take something off the wall, and I'm going to just show you, just because I don't know how well it'll show, but just the fact that you said Hockenheim. Hold please.
James, this is where we play the standby music, right? Oh man.
Oh wow.
Glare?
Yeah, it's a glare, but you can see what it is.
Tilt it. Look the other way, top to bottom. Take the top back.
There you go. Right there. Yeah.
See who's pushing that car?
Say again.
That's Senna.
Yeah.
So
in the
that was
Honda.
in 1990 at the Hockenheim. That was the year that we went to to the Isle of Man.
Oh, sweet.
My buddy and I went to the Grand Prix.
David, did you get that picture appropriately hung? I don't want to hear a crash because you were in a hurry.
Yeah.
That's good. But we went to the Grand Prix, and so this was 1990. Senna's in the McLaren, Mansell's in the Ferrari, PK's in the Benetton, and Alesi's in the Tyrrell. It's his first year in the Tyrrell before he moves to Ferrari the next year.
Ferrari, yeah.
Anyway, Senna breaks down. This is in practice on Saturday.
Saturdays, yeah.
Saturday practice. Senna breaks down on the front straight, sort of gets out. He's sitting on the wall, and he's just kind of waving. And we were just like right in the grandstands, right in the front, which we wouldn't have been able to sit if it was the race. I'm sure it was just that it was practice. And he waves, and I got some shots of that, and he's like pushing the car, and I'm like, holy fuck, it's Senna. And I'm like taking the picture. So I was at Hockenheim.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of blown away because I've followed F1 for a while. I love the Netflix series for F1. I think it's bringing a lot of people into it, a lot of bigger fan base for the Road America race that takes place here. But I was really surprised with the people, because I always associated F1 to Monaco. And actually, on a side note, I was actually in Monaco. I stayed in Monte Carlo for a couple days on an R&R when I was in the Army. And I was able to walk the actual track that was there, which was really cool. But I always felt that it was snooty, right? Oh, this is upper echelon racing. You got to be a millionaire.
Baby.
Yeah, well, go to a race. Hockenheim was I had more fun at Hockenheim than I did at a NASCAR race, because they're just there to have a good time. It was just, I was blown away by the people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man. I think Monaco is like, it is like, it's celebrity, it's crazy money and all that. But most of the tracks are like, they're just gearheads, right? They're wherever, guys in the infield getting drunk, staying in tents, So they're just that the cars are way more expensive. Technology is the top of the line. But
what are we gonna do when we don't have petroleum to get buzzed on together? I mean,
Hey.
It seems like every great relationship.
Don't worry, we'll all be dead. It'll be fine.
Okay.
Isle of Man. I mean, look at Isle of Man TT. They've got the electric bike race now. So
it's coming back. Yeah, they've done it once before, but
they did it a few times. Yeah.
It didn't get rousing.
The problem is you don't get the sound, right? And the sound is when I was
visceral.
at Grand Prix, we went to Montreal, and because I lived in Toronto, and we go to Montreal, and you'd hear that sound, and you'd like, we were like, you'd run like a moth to the flame, like you don't even know where it's coming from. You're like, fuck, and you'd like run, oh my god, and
first time at Indy, the concussive force that comes from being close to the cars when they go by, and the sound. It's like
you don't get that on TV.
You just don't. You don't. And
So we got like 2 minutes left before we got to wrap up, because it will just automatically shut us off, because this is the free Zoom, because you know we don't get paid for this, so we're using all the free shit that we can. So I mean, what should we expect from you coming out next? I mean, what's?
I guess I would just say that a little to plug myself. Just follow along on the David Goldman photo, my Instagram page. That's where I'll you know, for social media, that's where I upload the newest photos.
Okay.
And yeah, that's probably the place. And then the website, like you said, the motorcycle portraits, and check it out. And if you know somebody great that you think would be a good subject, I would say they got to be a great subject, not just a guy that rides a motorcycle, because I'm gonna be overwhelmed with people. Oh yeah, you got to photograph my buddy Jim.
Hey, my cousin Johnny, come on.
Yeah, okay, John.
Well,
John.
you know what though? I mean, with the LA connection, I mean, LaBelle from Dirty Honey, the lead vocalist,
yeah,
he's an avid adventure bike rider. We interviewed
I'll shoot you
him
some
on
leads.
Podcasts.
Cool, yeah.
He's a fantastic guy.
Yeah, and then you can introduce us to Lyle Lovett.
Yeah. Help us out with Leno if you score Leno.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
If I had Leno's money, I'd have Leno's garage.
Yeah,
Lucky dude, man. David, thank you so much. It was awesome to meet you. Really look forward to following your progress, man.
Yeah, thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful to talk to you.
It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
James?
Chris?
I guess we'll see each other next time.
Rider out.
Rider out.